Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. It's going to be all about the history of the internet, but not just the usual dates and names. We're going deeper than that. Exploring those fascinating little known stories and insights that make history come alive. We've got some awesome YouTube videos lined up, and let me tell you, they are packed with information that's going to surprise even the most tech-savvy listeners out there. So if you think you know everything about how the internet came to be, buckle up because we're about to uncover some seriously cool stuff.
I think what's really fascinating is how so many different things had to come together at the right time. Historical events, technological advancements, and a whole lot of human ingenuity to create the connected world we live in today. It's a story that spans decades and continents, and it's still unfolding.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's kick things off by going all the way back to 1957, the year Sputnik launched. Now, we all know this was a major moment in the space race, right? The Soviets getting that satellite up there first. It was a big deal. But did you ever stop to think about how deeply it impacted the future of the internet?
Sputnik was a huge wake-up call for the United States. It wasn't just about being beaten to space. It was about the strategic implications. The U.S. realized they needed to step up their game in terms of technology to maintain their position on the world stage. So they created ARPA, which later became DARPA, to really push the boundaries of tech research.
So in a way, we can kind of thank the Soviets for accidentally giving birth to the internet. I mean, obviously they weren't trying to do that, but their actions definitely had a ripple effect. And it wasn't just about rockets and satellites either, right? There was a lot happening in the world of computing at this time.
Oh, absolutely. This was a time of major innovation. One of the key breakthroughs was the concept of time sharing. Back then, computers were these giant, expensive machines that only one person could use at a time. Time sharing changed all that by allowing multiple users to access the same computer simultaneously. It was a huge step forward in making computing power more accessible.
It's like the early version of cloud computing, right? Except with room-sized mainframes instead of server farms. But even with all this innovation, you still need someone with a vision to see how it all fits together. And that's where JCR Licklider comes in.
Licklider was a true visionary. In the early 1960s, he imagined a network of interconnected computers where information could be shared seamlessly. He basically predicted the internet decades before it became a reality. And his ideas formed the foundation for ARPANET, which was the precursor to the internet as we know it.
So ARPANET, this was all about connecting research institutions, right? Letting them share resources and collaborate more effectively. What were some of the early challenges they faced in building this network?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles was figuring out how to make the network resilient. Remember, this was the Cold War, and there were serious concerns about potential disruptions or attacks. The solution came in the form of packet switching, which was a totally new way of transmitting data.
I remember learning about packet switching in school, but it always seems so abstract. One of the videos we watch actually is a really great analogy. Imagine a delivery company routing packages through various hubs to reach their destinations. Each package represents a small chunk of data taking different paths to get to its final destination.
Exactly. And that's a much better analogy than the WandaVision thing. Packet switching was a game changer because it meant that the network wasn't reliant on a single point of failure. If one path went down, the data could simply be rerouted through another path, ensuring that communication continued.
So basically, the internet was built to survive a nuclear attack. That's pretty impressive. But hold on a second. Wasn't packet switching also being developed in other parts of the world at the same time?
You're right about that. While Paul Barron in the U.S. gets a lot of the credit, a researcher named Donald Davies in the U.K. was independently working on a very similar concept around the same time. He even came up with the term packet, which we still use today. It's a great example of how brilliant minds often come up with the same solutions independently.
That's fascinating. So we've got ARPANET up and running, packet switching is making it resilient, and research institutions are sharing information like never before. What's the next big leap in this story?
Well, ARPANET was a great start, but it was still a closed system. It was like this exclusive club. The real turning point came with the development of TCP/IP. This is the set of protocols that allow different networks to talk to each other. It's like a universal language that allows all these different networks to understand each other regardless of their hardware or software.
So TCP/IP was the key to unlocking the true potential of the internet, turning it from a bunch of isolated networks into a single interconnected global network. And this happened in 1983, right?
Exactly. Vinton Cerf and Bob Kahn, they're the ones who developed TCP/IP, and they really deserve a lot of credit. They ushered in a new era of open communication and collaboration. which is what allowed the internet to grow so rapidly.
It's incredible how much impact a few lines of code can have on the world. But it's not just about the technology, right? It's also about the people who were passionate about connecting the world. So let's talk about some of those unsung heroes who helped shape the early internet.
Absolutely, there are so many people who deserve recognition. One example that comes to mind is Radia Perlman. Have you ever heard of her?
The name rings a bell. Didn't she solve some kind of major network problem?
She did. She was an MIT student who developed something called the spanning tree protocol, which prevented network crashes caused by bridge loops. It was a really critical fix that helped ensure the stability of the growing network.
Wow, talk about pressure, a single student making such a huge contribution to the internet. That's amazing. What other interesting people were involved in those early days?
Well, as the network grew, it became harder and harder to keep track of all the computers that were connected to it. Imagine trying to find a specific computer when all you have is its numerical IP address. That's where Elizabeth Feinler and her team at the Network Information Center came in. They created the first phone book for the internet. It was basically a directory that listed the names and addresses of all the connected computers.
They were like the pioneers of the digital yellow pages. That's a huge undertaking.
It was, and their work laid the foundation for the domain name system, or DNS, which is what allows us to use easy-to-remember names like google.com instead of those long strings of numbers.
That's something we take for granted now, but it was a huge step forward in making the internet more user-friendly. But speaking of making the internet more accessible, we can't forget about Al Gore and his famous claim about inventing the internet. I know it's become a bit of a joke, but was there any truth to his involvement?
Well, Al Gore didn't single-handedly invent the internet, but he did play a significant role in promoting its accessibility and potential, especially during his time as a senator.
His vision of an information superhighway seemed pretty futuristic at the time, but looking back, it's actually pretty close to the reality we live in today.
Absolutely, he championed the Gore Bill of 1991, which was really important in expanding internet access to schools and libraries that paved the way for wider adoption and helped lead to the massive impact the internet has had on society. It's amazing to see how all these different pieces came together to create the internet we know and love today.
It's been a fascinating journey so far, from Sputnik to packet switching, from time sharing to the early pioneers like Radia Perlman and Elizabeth Feinler. We're starting to get a much deeper understanding of the internet's origins, but I have a feeling we're just scratching the surface. What else is in store for us as we delve further into the internet's evolution?
Get ready for the next chapter because things are about to get even more interesting. We're going to dive into the World Wide Web, the rise of web browsers, and the birth of e-commerce. It's the story of how the internet went from a niche technology to a global phenomenon that touches every aspect of our lives. So stay tuned because we're just getting started.
I can't wait.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So we just left off with the internet becoming a truly global network thanks to TCP/IP. That was a huge step. But there was still a long way to go from there to the internet we know and use today. Like, for one thing, remember dial-up? That screeching sound of connecting, oh, it's practically a nostalgic ringtone now.
Yeah, dial-up. It was definitely a rite of passage for anyone who wanted to get online back in the day. It was slow, it tied up your phone line, and downloading a single song could take, like, forever. But hey, it got the job done.
It's crazy about how much our patience has changed, right? Like, waiting minutes for a web page to load is practically unheard of now. But even before broadband became the norm, there were companies trying to make the internet more user-friendly. I'm thinking about those AOL installation CDs that used to show up in the mail, like everyone had a stack of those things.
Oh yeah, AOL, they were like the gatekeepers to the internet for a lot of people. Their subscription model and that simple interface made it a lot less intimidating to get online, and they even had their own curated content and communities, which was a lot of people's first experience with online social interaction.
It's interesting how these companies that seemed so huge at the time can fade away as technology moves forward. But speaking of moving forward, how did we go from being tethered to our desktops with dial-up to this world where we're constantly connected wherever we go? Like, what was that turning point?
Wi-Fi, that was the game changer. It liberated us from those tangled Ethernet cables and made it possible to access the internet wirelessly. Laptops became truly portable, and coffee shops transformed into, like, mobile offices.
I remember the first time I connected to Wi-Fi, it felt like magic. And speaking of magic, one of the videos we watched revealed this surprising connection between Wi-Fi and Hollywood. Did you know that the foundation for Wi-Fi technology was actually laid by Hedy Lamarr, you know, the famous actress, but also a brilliant inventor?
It's a fascinating story. During World War II, she co-invented this system for frequency hopping that was meant to prevent enemy jamming of radio signals. And that concept of rapidly switching between frequencies, that's actually a core component of Wi-Fi technology. It's amazing how her work from decades earlier had such a profound impact on our modern world.
It's like a real-life superhero origin story, right? A glamorous actress by day secretly inventing technology that would shape the future. But, okay, back to the internet itself. We've got faster connections, more people online, and a whole new way to interact with information thanks to the World Wide Web. What happens next in this evolution?
Well, all those factors created the perfect environment for innovation. And that's where the dot-com boom of the late 90s comes in. It was this period of incredible excitement and investment in internet-based businesses. Everyone was trying to get in on the action.
It was like the gold rush of the internet age.
Right.
But we all know how that ended. The dot-com bubble burst, and it left a lot of shattered dreams in its wake.
It was a classic case of speculation getting ahead of reality. A lot of those businesses were built on shaky foundations without any real solid plans. But even though the bubble burst, it wasn't all for nothing. It taught us some valuable lessons about building a sustainable internet economy.
Yeah, and it paved the way for the rise of e-commerce, which has completely changed the way we shop. I remember the first time I bought something online, it felt so futuristic. Did you have any early e-commerce experiences?
I do. Back then, it felt like a big risk to enter your credit card information online. But as security measures got better and more people started shopping online, e-commerce really took off.
Now it's hard to imagine life without online shopping, from groceries to clothes to booking flights and even finding apartments. So much of our lives have moved online. But e-commerce is just one part of this whole evolving internet landscape. What other big changes were happening around this time?
Well, we can't talk about the evolution of the internet without mentioning social media platforms like MySpace, Facebook, and Twitter. They emerged and changed the way we connect, communicate, and share information.
It's amazing how quickly social media took over the world. I remember when Facebook first came out, you needed a college email address to join. It felt like this exclusive club. Now it's like a global town square. But with all the good that social media has brought, connecting people, sharing information, building communities, there's also a darker side to it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Social media has raised concerns about privacy, the spread of misinformation, and the creation of these echo chambers where people only see information that confirms their existing beliefs. It's a powerful tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. It's all about being aware of the potential downsides.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to add before we get to the modern internet era, and that's the rise of mobile devices.
The arrival of the iPhone in 2007, that was a major turning point. It brought the internet to our fingertips, literally making it accessible anytime, anywhere.
It's hard to believe there was ever a time when we weren't constantly glued to our smartphones.
The rise of smartphones and tablets led to this explosion in mobile internet usage. The internet went from being a primarily desktop-based experience to something that's seamlessly integrated into our daily lives. It changed everything, from how we consume news to how we navigate our cities.
So we've got broadband internet making everything faster Wi-Fi, freeing us from those pesky cables, e-commerce, changing how we shop, and social media connecting us in new ways. And then boom, the iPhone comes along and puts the entire internet in our pockets. It's mind-blowing to think about how much the internet has evolved in just a few decades.
It's been an incredible journey, and it's far from over. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore how these trends have continued to shape the internet, leading us to the world we live in today. We'll talk about the challenges of cybersecurity, the rise of artificial intelligence, and the ongoing debates about privacy and data ownership. And we'll even try to look ahead and see what the future might hold for this ever-evolving digital landscape. So stay tuned.
All right, so we're back. It's amazing to think about how far we've come, right? From those early days of dial-up to having the entire internet in our pockets. But this journey, it's not over yet. We left off talking about social media and smartphones, so where do things go from there?
Well, it's kind of like the 2010s were the decade when the internet really became embedded in every aspect of our lives. You know, social media went from being this new thing to being a lot of people's main source of news and information. And then you had all these apps popping up, creating this whole ecosystem within our phones.
Yeah, it's like we went from logging onto the internet to being constantly connected, like always on. What kind of impact did that have on us, on the way we live and work and just interact with each other?
Well, for one thing, it blurred the lines between our personal and professional lives. Like, we're always reachable, always checking emails, always scrolling through social media. It creates this sense of urgency, this constant demand for our attention. But at the same time, it's also given us the ability to work remotely, to connect with people all over the world, to access information instantly. So it's a trade-off.
Definitely a double-edged sword. And as more of our lives moved online, it also raised concerns about privacy and security. I remember those early days of social media. We were all so excited to connect that we didn't really think about the data we were sharing.
Oh yeah, there was a certain naivete back then. But as people became more aware of how much data was being collected and the potential for it to be misused, the conversation started to change. We began to see the importance of data privacy strong passwords and being more mindful of our digital footprint.
It's a constant learning process, right? Like, it feels like every day there's a new story about a data breach or some security flaw. How can we even keep up with all that, you know? How can we protect ourselves in this crazy digital world?
It's a challenge for sure. Strong passwords and two-factor authentication, those are essential. But we also need to be more critical of the information we see online. Misinformation and disinformation have become so widespread, it's easier than ever to be misled. We need to develop our media literacy skills, fact-check things, and be aware of our own biases.
So it's like we need a whole new set of skills to navigate the internet. But beyond the challenges, what are some of the exciting developments that are shaping the future of the internet? I've heard a lot about artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things.
Those are definitely two of the biggest game changers. Artificial intelligence is already being used in so many ways, like personalizing online experiences, recommending products, filtering content. But it's also raising these ethical questions about bias transparency, the impact on jobs. And then you've got the Internet of Things, connecting our physical world to the Internet. Like everything from smart homes and wearable devices to connected cars and smart cities. It's pretty mind-blowing.
It really makes you think about how much our world is changing because of the internet. But with all this connectivity and automation, are we losing something in the process? You know, what about human connection, creativity, critical thinking?
Those are really important questions. It's all about finding that balance, embracing the convenience and the possibilities of technology, but also holding on to those things that make us human. It's not about rejecting technology. It's about using it in a way that serves us.
Yeah, we need to be the ones in control, not the other way around. But even as we're figuring all that out, the internet keeps evolving at this incredible pace. What do you think the future holds for this constantly changing digital landscape?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's impossible to predict, for sure, but there are some trends we can see. The development of blockchain technology that has the potential to decentralize the internet, give users more control over their data, create new opportunities, and then quantum computing could revolutionize everything from scientific research to cybersecurity. The future of the internet is a wide open frontier, full of possibilities and challenges.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the history of the internet. It's been quite a journey from those Cold War beginnings to the world of social media, smartphones, and beyond. What stands out to you most from all this?
You know what really strikes me? It's the incredible ingenuity and collaboration that have driven this whole technological revolution. I mean, countless people from all over the world have contributed their talents and ideas to create this global network that connects us in ways that were unimaginable just a few decades ago. It's a testament to human creativity and our desire to connect with each other.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a story that reminds us that we're all part of something much bigger than ourselves. And as the internet keeps evolving, it's up to all of us to shape its future, to make sure it's a force for good in the world.
Absolutely. The internet has the power to connect, to educate, to empower, to inspire. It's up to us to use this incredible tool wisely and responsibly to build a better world for ourselves and for future generations.
And on that note, we're going to wrap things up. Thanks for joining us on a deep dive into the history of the internet. We hope you learned something new and had a little fun along the way.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.